Energy Transition, episode number 76. Big Oil, Big Miner. Good morning to the podcasters, to our viewers and supporters.
Morning.
Morning, good
Good morning.
afternoon.
Good day.
Uh, Let me please share. Big Oil seems to be entering the mining sector, and this is the case of Shell buying some assets to be part of
Exxon.
Exxon. Uh, Exxon again, it's a veteran Exxon.
Big shovel.
Big shovel. All right.
The big shovel. Oh my gosh. Wow.
And here's a list of top 50 mining companies. You see that Australia has the big two most important ones.
Of course.
Impressive. Yeah, impressive. Tell me, please let me start with you. Is a good strategy for our companies entering the mining sector? What's the reasons they are thinking?
Well, I think as we've discussed on previous episodes, and it's important to kind of bring that back in again, is that a lot of it has to do with their ESG scores. So if they want to reduce their ESG scores, they're going to have to make these investments. And in some ways, they're like Canada, for example, the United States, it's almost going to be a requirement that they have made these investments to counter um, their traditional sphere of business, which is bizarre. But in order in order to meet these new requirements, and in the EU in particular, with their new climate reporting, companies are just going to have to. Now, what's interesting is that the oil majors and a lot of different oil companies, oil services companies, they have that skill set. So, for example, there's a new lithium extraction technique where they can take the brine directly from the wells. And I spoke to an oil well services company and a driller, and they're like, "Oh, well, this is just like what we do for the oil and gas industry, except now we're drilling for lithium brine, and there's these new techniques in order to separate it, so you don't need the big evaporation ponds."
Right.
So they're deploying the technology that they already have. So it's good in some ways.
You're
Yeah,
on mute,
I
Armando.
Sorry again. Sorry,
Uh,
sorry. Yeah, Irina, could you please go ahead with this strategy? Why they are moving to
uh,
this sector?
because of what Tammy said, I actually wrote an article for Oil Price a couple of months ago about this direct lithium extraction, which Tammy referenced. Schlumberger is investing in it. Occidental Petroleum is investing in it, but it's new. It's very promising. It sounds very well because it requires a lot less water, I think, and you don't have these ponds and you don't take up so much space. It's more sparing for the environment. But as I said, it's early days for this technology, and we'll see if it really works as advertised. And speaking of big oil investing in technologies that are more in line with the transition narrative and transition requirements, uh, oil companies are also interested, some oil companies, in geothermal, because it's the same thing they know how to do, that they do for oil and gas, they can do it for heat. It's a little bit different because you have to drill much deeper, and that comes with its own set of challenges. But that's also an alternative avenue of investment and development for the oil industry. It won't win them any social recognition or any praise from the transition crowd, because nothing big oil or small oil does will. Whatever they do is wrong, but they really don't have a lot of choice right now, and these are things they know how to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
But David, not only oil companies, but services companies like Schlumberger,
sure.
Halliburton, other. What's the reason for service companies? You mean not to be owner of the assets, but to let's see, provide services for the mining.
Yeah, when we're SLB or Schlumberger, formerly Schlumberger, now SLB is concerned, they're really diversifying their technology and service offerings. They are actively trying to go into these other industries and have been in some of them for quite a while. These are companies just like ExxonMobil that are engineering driven companies that, as Tammy and Irina have talked about, have this expertise on staff. And when you think about what's required in a mining operation or an lithium extraction operation, it's not just engineering, but it's also supply chain management, logistics, transportation expertise, understanding markets. And these are all disciplines that are already on staff at these companies. And so, and it's a contrast to the strategies that we've seen over the past 20, 25 years from European companies like BP and Shell, who have, kind of gone out and bought wind projects and invested in wind and solar and traditional renewables kinds of projects to burnish their ESG scores and to create good PR around their company's image. But what we've seen this year is those two companies that I mentioned now rethinking that strategy, right? Because those disciplines are not their core competencies as an organization. They've done those things for ESG and PR reasons. They see ESG now falling out of favor. And what are they doing? Well, now they're backing up and saying, you know what, we're going to refocus on how we're going about this. And I would expect to see those companies now start moving in this kind of direction. And a couple of weeks ago, I said, I predicted that 5 years from now, ExxonMobil's low carbon solutions business unit, may well be its most profitable business unit 5 years from now. And what you see them investing in is these kinds of carbon reduction activities, and not just carbon, but other emissions as well, like carbon capture, like hydrogen. Now talking about potentially going into the lithium extraction business, geothermal, all of these kinds of solutions that are fit for purpose for the expertise they already have on staff, rather than trying to just worry about their PR and their ESG. They're worried about making a profit and doing it with their current people and not having to go out and create all these new disciplines within their organization. So, it makes sense for ExxonMobil, makes sense for SLB, Halliburton, all these engineering driven companies.
Yeah, perfect. Only remarking that Khaled found
Good morning, Colin.
Good morning. One comment.
LinkedIn user. I think that may be Stu Turley, incognito.
But David, let me ask you, in terms of geopolitical and regulatory risks, are they seen the same as the service opportunities? Regulatory areas are very different. You are an expert in this sector.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, all companies, and not just in the energy business, but all companies in business today in America, in the Western world, not so much in other parts of the world, but in the West and developed nations are facing these pressures. And even though Larry Fink said a month ago that he's not going to talk about ESG anymore, now we're starting to see media articles saying, well, they're not talking about it, but they're still doing it, right? They're just changing the language they use, which, we all, when we had our episode about that, said that's probably what's going to happen. Well, that's exactly what's happening. And so these pressures are, from the financial sector, from the regulatory sector, are going to continue until we start to see regime change in these Western countries. And I just read a piece today about the conservative political party in Argentina suddenly showing a great deal of additional support, in Germany as well. in France as well. And so you're starting to see the political tide turn. And if elections start turning, that's the only way these pressures will begin to relent on these companies to go in these non-core directions. And, it just depends on our country's abilities to maintain free and fair elections. And I think that's probably what we will see happen over the next half decade.
Okay. We have a question from Brian. David, please help me because the font here is
All
very.
these lithium and geothermal projects, as well as oil, coal, and solar, are happening within a few kilometers of each other in southeast Saskatchewan. Well, yeah, and in Texas too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah. I
Well,
mean, Tammy
I
will know more about that.
I wanted to give a shout out to Brian Zinchuk because he was kind enough to take me on a tour of that area and talk to some of the well services companies and the oil and gas companies who are working in this space. And it was just phenomenal to see. It was this very small area as part of the Williston Basin, and just the amount of activity that's going on there, not just for the traditional development, but how they use the carbon capture to help do enhanced oil recovery, and how they did the geothermal mining or drilling and the lithium drilling and so on. So I mean, it it's good, and because it's enables the oil services companies to diversify to some extent and keep people working, because even though the governments in some respects are, as Irina pointed out, it doesn't matter what the oil and gas companies do, it's bad. It's a way to keep to keep operating and whatnot. And what concerns me, and when David's talking about regulatory issues, is that okay, let's say we vote the governments out, but my sense is that once these things are in motion and there's certain business decisions being made, then I could see the big companies saying, well, look, we've already made a lot of investment in this sphere, in this space, in this direction. We don't necessarily want to give it up. So there could be
And that's not
pressure.
necessarily a bad thing, is it?
Right.
Right.
Because my next concern though is that, so okay, we're mining all the resource. How are we processing it? Because I was looking through the lithium extraction, the little bit that's done in Canada. It's all sent to either India or China for processing, and then it gets sent back. So are we going to set up processing facilities here? What are the environmental impacts of that? Or are we just going to once again be doing extraction and shipping it off somewhere else for processing?
Well, they will probably set up local facilities because it's all about, making the new transition supply chains resilient and
Resilient,
not so
shorter.
Yeah.
shorter, yeah, and local, and not so reliant on China, because suddenly everyone's woken up to the fact that a lot of things get processed and produced in China. So that they will probably have to build local processing capacity
They'll try to do that, yeah, but
if they're serious about it.
Yeah, China's not just going to sit still and watch it all happen without doing what they can do to exercise geopolitical leverage, to crash the market, to stop those kinds of investments in the United States and other parts of the West, which China has done on a very regular basis in order to continue dominating these markets. And so, it's going to depend a lot on political will, whether we can actually get those things done in the U.S. and elsewhere.
So true.
Irina, let me see your vision about that. Solar and wind energy prices are falling, and oil prices are.
No, they're not.
No, not. It's not falling.
No.
Wind and solar.
No, we actually recently talked about wind costs, that they're rising
pretty
very
dramatically.
sharply. Yeah.
So, and oil is rising. So,
Yeah.
is there an
Which is going to push the
expected-
price of wind and solar higher too,
Yeah, exactly.
if it
Why?
continues long enough.
Yeah, but is there a reason for that, or pure?
Well, yeah, there's record oil demand. which apparently came as a surprise to the International Energy Agency. Someone on Twitter the other day, I forgot the name, someone knowledgeable about the energy industry, noted what a difference 2 years make. In 2021, the IEA said that oil demand peaked in 2019. It's going
Yeah.
to go down from here. It has been rising so strongly. It's hit a record. But now they've amended that. Yeah, sure, this year is going to rise, but soon enough, economic
Next year.
headwinds will, pressure prices next year. Yeah, next year it's going to
It's
fall
always next year.
sharply. That's what the bureau people are saying. But until then, if oil is more expensive, wind and solar will be more expensive. Everything will be more expensive, as we discussed, I think, last week or the week before last. Was recent.
So, do you believe, Tammy and Dave, that the price for wind and solar will continue to rise, or when can start falling?
Well, do you mean like the cost of installing it, or is that what you
Both,
mean?
both installing and operations. But installing, I suppose, more important at this time than operations. Operations
Well,
is too small price, no costs.
Well, if you have so much competition for the solar panels and the wind turbines and all the materials that are involved in it, and if there's high demand, you might mine more, and then that could bring the price down. Okay, but for the most part, it's it's more expensive to put it up because everybody's doing it. So
Yeah,
if you've got all these Western countries um, buying into that, then those costs are going to increase. And as Irina pointed out, it's the wind turbines aren't as robust as they've been made out to be. So the bearings go, the blades go, things have to get replaced, and it's costing the companies a whole lot of money to keep fixing. So that means the costs increase. Well, if your input cost is also energy, and that energy comes from oil and gas, which is increasing in price, well, then of course the cost of
that's right.
making them increase, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right. Brian has another question here.
On August 6th, Saskatchewan, 617 megawatts of installed wind produced zero power for 3 hours, 17 minutes. Yeah.
Wow, zero.
Yeah,
That's just
that's
3 hours. We
yeah.
shouldn't get bogged down into such details. That's just three
if
hours. It's nothing.
right, if only we
Yeah.
had some batteries. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, can preserve energy for future. There's another point here from
Wind and
Mike.
solar generate power outside of
Outside
much
the
of the
peak.
peak demand window.
True.
Renewables need avenues to be capable of earning returns consistently for generation outside of that window, which tends to make up 75% of their operational time. Correct. And this is why when we see these media reports, and there seems to be 30 a day, claiming that wind and solar are getting cheaper and are very inexpensive, low cost energy. What they don't ever seem to want to mention to you is that is the subsidized cost to consumers of wind and solar. Well, where is the subsidy coming from? It's coming from debt. I would say it's coming from taxpayers, but it's really coming from debt issued by your government at increasingly high interest rates that your grandchildren are going to have to pay off for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not cheap and inexpensive energy. It's very expensive energy that's going to continue to cost our societies dearly over 2 or 3 generations. And the claim that it's anything other than that is specious and false, and I'm tired of hearing it. So that's my rant for the day.
Yeah. And last I heard, renewables saved Texas from blackouts, David. Did you see that?
Well, there's some truth to that. Okay. We've added a lot of solar over the past 3 years here in Texas.
No,
And
right.
that's not a bad thing. Again, I keep telling everyone I'm not against wind and solar, particularly solar. And so, yes, the additional solar capacity has helped ERCOT manage through this very hot summer. But what solar, all that added solar does not do is solve for the problem of the fact that we have added a net 1 gigawatt of thermal dispatchable energy in Texas, generation capacity in Texas
Right.
over the past decade. And that's at a time when our population has risen 25% and our economy has been the fastest growing state economy in the country year after year after year. And we don't have enough dispatchable thermal energy to get us through another winter storm, folks. And if we don't start building it to Texas, we're going to have a grid that's no more stable than California. And it doesn't make any difference at all how much solar we keep adding to this grid.
Yeah.
It won't make any difference at all in the midst of a winter storm when solar and wind inevitably fall completely off the grid.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of having to say that. But because of the false reporting, absolutely false reporting in most of our media, I keep having to say that. And I know people get tired of hearing it from me, but it's the truth.
Yeah. Well said.
That's my other rant for the day.
Oh,
So
you're right.
tired of IEA. Not as tired as Arena, I would think.
I don't know. I honestly don't know anymore.
Yeah. I followed them to see what uninformed, uneducated energy organizations / people might be thinking.
So you follow
Can I
them for the amusement value, for the entertainment value. I can
Yes,
understand that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Good,
I'd
John.
like to. Can I add something about the IEA? So
Sure,
one of the
sure.
interesting aspects of it is that they're often used. They're told that it has to. The IEA reports have to be used by anyone who follows the ISSB. So if you're following the ISSB financial disclosures for climate, they highly recommend using different scenarios and predictions made by the IEA and the IPCC. So if you think of that, and they'll always go back to that report that says supply is going to, or demand's dropping, even though the updated ones will say, well, demand's increasing, but it will be at some point in the near future. Companies will have to use that data set or those predictions for their operations,
Which
of
are
course,
inaccurate.
which are inaccurate. So that's concerning.
Yeah, good.
That's very concerning.
Very concerning.
Very concerned. LinkedIn users do not know.
Back to lithium and the whole energy transition topic, it looks like some experts aren't seeing the abundance of hydrocarbons versus limited lithium and other materials. Does it look to you all that the noise made for energy transition might actually jeopardize energy security, just taking into consideration the amount of resources?
Of
Well,
course.
lithium's everywhere. It's in every drop of brine on the face of the earth. It's just a matter of it being there in sufficient concentrations to make it feasible to extract at a profit. And we still have to try to do that, don't we?
Yeah, but I think that's a good point about energy security, because
Yes.
Yeah.
it's good to be diversified. And I think one of the saddest things in the West, particularly North America, is trying to get rid of coal. Because if, from a strategic perspective, if you take out a natural gas pipeline, you're cut off, and it's very difficult to get that repaired and back going or whatever. But coal, at least you can stockpile a big mound of it or whatever that you can then use for power generation and keep things going, and you could liquefy it or whatever, like Germany did during World War II. And of course, oil is more portable. You can move it around. And so to try and get rid of those things that enable you to have that strategic benefit is concerning, because the West is doing that, but China and other is investing in everything, and they're building up more coal, they're building up more natural gas, and they're deploying carbon capture and so on to some extent.
Building
So
and that's because China prioritizes energy security over transition considerations.
As everyone should.
Look,
Everyone should.
SRB is back. Hi, SRB.
In what part of the world do you expect to see the growth of geothermal? What type of geothermal? Man, with the new technologies, we could see it everywhere, really. Geothermal can be recovered from pretty much any formation, conventional formation in which oil and gas wells have been drilled. with the new technology, and so we're going to see a lot more geothermal investment. And I
Yeah,
defer
to
to
bring the
Rena.
costs down.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
would have to.
Brian, the key thing about lithium.
Yeah.
It is
It is.
It's like
storage, not
hydrogen.
energy. Yeah. Well, yes, but
Good
it's
point.
it's also the key to the EV industry. And as long as we're going to try to subsidize the EV industry into profitability, lithium is going to be needed. Now, I 10 years from now, that whole concept may have been ditched, because when you really look at what's happening in the EV space in the United States, Tesla is the only company making a profit on an EV division. Rivian's about to go bankrupt. All these startups are struggling to just stay afloat. Ford's going to lose $4.5 billion on its EV segment this year. GM's losing its butt on its own segment as well. And so none of them are profitable except Tesla. And it took Tesla 14 years to become profitable, and hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, well, not trillions, but hundreds of billions in cheap loans and subsidies from the government before Tesla ever turned a quarterly profit. So,
Yeah.
Trillions are only for leveraging. It's a
huh?
different slide. Trillion, when called trillion, is for leveraging. And billion is for Elon Musk. Domenic is here. Robert Domenico.
Well, that's one way to put it, Robert.
Accurate.
I'm not sure Tammy would ever say that, but I probably would. She's too polite.
Yeah. EV industry, like
It's like the smash and grab flash mob. Well, it's focused in California, so that may explain it.
Well, I mean, the EV industry in Canada, I mean, we've just given over, I don't know how many billions to battery manufacturers. And yeah, I don't know. It's a pyramid scheme. Does that work?
Yeah, Ponzi, pyramid, whatever scheme you want. Yeah.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because taxpayers have to pay.
And what's the conclusion for today? Could be congratulations for David for the renewable
Well
energy.
done, Texas.
Go Texas, go. God bless Texas.
Yeah, so nice. Yeah, that's good. Okay, people. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Short, 30 minutes, but very strong one.
Sorry, I
Thank
got
you to
so
all the
emotional.
comments. That's okay.
Have a great week.
Great
Thank you. Have a good
Have
week,
a wonderful
everybody.
week, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.